Hello Bookish friends, welcome to my February wrap-up part 2. In this video, I will talk about the 6 books that I finished in the second half of February. Like I did in my previous wrap-ups, I will insert the clips that I've recorded quite soon after I finish those works. Today is the 18th of February and I finished the book that I was reading for Krista's Patron Book Club, which was The House of Eve by Sadeqa Johnson. This book takes place in 1950s Philadelphia and Washington DC. In Philadelphia, 15-year-old Ruby Purcell is on track to becoming the first in her family to attend college, in spite of having a mother more interested in keeping a man than raising a daughter. But a taboo love affair threatens to pull her back down into poverty and desperation that has been passed on to her like a birthright. Eleanor Quarles arrives in Washington DC with ambition and secrets. When she meets the handsome William Pride at Howard University, they fall madly in love. But William hails from one of DC's elite wealthy black families, and his parents don't let just anyone into their fold. I really enjoyed the writing style of this book, and I was quite impressed by how much involved I was in both of these stories, which is something that rarely happens in books with two different timelines or two different points of view. I think the book portrayed black societies in America of 1950s quite well, and I learned a quite significant amount of details which I of course did not know, such as a caste system existing in the black communities according to the color of their skin. I had heard about such things, but I did not know it was so prominent in the society in those times. Although the connection of these two stories became very obvious after a certain point in the book, because I was quite invested in both Eleanor and Ruby's stories. I really wanted to know what would happen to them at the end of the book. Overall, if I had rated books 7.5 out of 10, I would have given this book 7.5. But I will of course round it up to 8 out of 10 because it is a quite good book, like I said in my review. Today is the 19th of February and I finished the book that I was reading for my in-person book club, which was Tütüncü, Çırağı, The Tobacconist by Robert Seethaler. I read the Turkish edition of this book, originally written in German. In this book, when 17-year-old Franz exchanges his home in the idyllic beauty of the Austrian Lake District for the bustle of Vienna, his homesickness quickly dissolves amidst the throng of the city. In his role as apprentice to the elderly tobacconist Otto Transeck, he will soon be supplying the great and good of Vienna with their newspapers and cigarettes. Among the regulars is a Professor Freud, whose predilection for cigars and occasional willingness to dispense romantic advice will forge a bond between him and young Franz. It is 1937. In a matter of months, Germany will annex Austria. If my friend had not chosen this book for the book club, I probably would have never heard of this book. But I thought it was a very well written book, and the portrayal of Austria at those times were quite interesting and also quite sad to read. It was interesting how the attitudes of people towards foreigners and especially Jews changed in a matter of months in the country. I really enjoyed the complex character of Franz. He started as a naive young boy and became a very knowledgeable and practical man because of the things he witnessed in a matter of just 2 years. Also, the friendship between him and Sigmund Freud was one of the most interesting parts of the story. Overall, I gave Tütüncü, Çırağı, The Tobacconist by Robert Seethaler an 8 out of 10. It is the 27th of February and I finished 2 books back to back. The first book that I finished was the book that I was reading for my project of reading all the books of Liane Moriarty. And the book that I finished was her second novel, The Last Anniversary. This book follows a number of characters that are centered around a historical mystery that happened in an Australian island, Scribbly Gum. Sophie Hannibal has unexpectedly inherited her ex's Aunt Connie's house on this island, home of the famously unsolved Monroe baby mystery. Sophie moves into the island and begins a new life as a part of unconventional family where everyone has a secret. Her best friend and her ex's sister, Grace, their cousin, Margie, her ex's mother, and Aunt Rose, one of the sisters who found the abandoned Monroe baby and adopted her. Like all of the Liane Moriarty's book, this book has a wonderful build-up to the main mystery. Aside from this very interesting mystery, most impressive part of this book was how well constructed almost all of the characters were. I especially felt very related to the main character, Sophie. All of the female characters in this book had realistic issues which made me sympathize with all of them. And most probably that was one of the reasons why I wanted to know how the mystery would affect those women. One of the significant plot lines in the book did not end as I wanted to be. However, after finishing the book, I think it makes perfect sense why it did not come as I wanted to be. Overall, I'm very glad that I read another very engaging Liane Moriarty book, and I gave The Last Anniversary by Liane Moriarty an 8 out of 10. The second book that I finished was my buddy read with Angelia at Read and Reread. I reread Kalan by Leyla Erbil. However, I read the English translation. When I first read this book in 2020, it did not make an impact on me because it was the middle of the pandemic. When I reread it this year with Angelia, I remember how confused I was while reading the book. This novel is considered an experimental novel in which a very large section in the beginning is written as a poem, and then in the second part it turns into a more constructive text with some poems spread through this text, and there are no use of punctuation in the text. Like you can guess, this was a very trying book to read, and to be honest, I'm a bit surprised that among Leyla Erbil's novels, this was the one chosen for translation, because you really need to be aware of the Turkish political history to understand this already very confusing book, in which we follow the thoughts of our heroine Lerzan as she remembers her childhood and her quite unconventional upbringing in Istanbul with a very cosmopolitan society up until a very significant event in the Turkish political history happens. There is a side narrative which follows her present love life. Although I understood many of the references that she made about the Turkish history, the structuring of the book was not really for me, like I said before. I think the best part of this reading experience was our discussion with Angelia and how she viewed this very confusing book. Most naturally, she was more focused on the childhood and the family aspect of Lerzan. And it was interesting to discuss some of the Turkish traditions and the way that our society lived in those times with her. But I have to admit, although I enjoyed the experience much more, I did not change my original rating, and I gave Kalan What Remains by Leyla Erbil a 6 out of 10. Today is the 28th of February, and in the last day of the month, I finished 2 books. The first book that I finished was a short audiobook, A Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This book takes place in 60 seconds. The time it takes a kid to decide whether or not he's going to murder the guy who killed his brother. 15-year-old Will has showed a gun in the back of his jeans because his brother Sean was just murdered. And Will knows the rules. No crying, no snitching, revenge. Will gets on the elevator with the gun on the 7th floor, and on each floor somebody from his past gets on the elevator and talks to Will about his decision. In the first years that I've joined BookTube, this book was a BookTube darling. And I have previously read Ghost by this author and thought it was just fine. So to be honest, this book was not one of my must-read books list. When I finally listened to this work, I can clearly see why this book is so beloved. It has a very, very powerful message which is given in quite a few words. You totally get into the mindset of Will and the conflict between his supposed duty and his fear of committing such a heinous act. Jason Reynolds states at the end of the book that he interviewed many children in juvenile centers. I can totally see that because the book feels very, very sincere. Also, Jason Reynolds' narration is very, very good. So I'm very, very glad that I listened to this book and I gave Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds 9 out of 10. And the second book that I finished was the book that I chose for my Turkish Shelf online book club. There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Şafak. The book follows 3 different characters in 3 different timelines. In Victorian London, an extraordinary child is born at the age of the dirt black Thames. Arthur's only chance of escaping poverty is his brilliant memory. When his gift earns him as a spot as an apprentice at a printing press, Arthur's world opens up far beyond the slums, with one book soon sending him across the ancient city of Nivene and its remains. In 2014, Turkey, Narin, a Yazidi girl living in the river Tigris, waits to be baptized with water brought from the holy shift of Lalish in Iraq. The ceremony is cruelly interrupted, and soon Narin and her grandmother must journey across world-torn lands in the hope of reaching the sacred valley of their people. And finally, in 2018 London, broken-hearted Sadeqa, a hydrologist, moves to a houseboat on the Thames to escape the wreckage of her marriage. I have previously read many books by Elif Şafak, and that was the reason why I decided to start my online book club with her newest book. And there's something very different about Elif Şafak, that you get a different sense of writing style, mood and satisfaction from each book. At least that was my experience. In this book, I really loved the writing style. It was very literary, but not so flowery, so that it does not take us away from the theme of the book and the plot. Although they were connected by the Epic of Gilgamesh, the characters were quite distinctive with very different characteristics. Arthur was a very likable narrator. However, he was quite clueless and naive in many aspects. Narin, as a 9-year-old, was almost like an angelic fairy tale character, and her grandmother was sort of like the fairy godmother of Narin. Sadeqa was a character that I found least interesting. However, she also had quite realistic issues, and could not help but sympathize with her. I admire the courage that Elif Şafak chose to touch upon so many social issues about especially hatred towards Yazidi society among both Muslims and Christians. The connection between these 3 storylines gradually increased, like water slowly getting into each other and mixing in a river, like the title suggests. However, especially in the middle part of the book, I felt like the author was trying too hard to make these connections noticeable I liked it much more when they were very subtle in the beginning. And I felt the same about one storyline at the end of the book. Other than this minor annoyance, I've thought There Are Rivers in the Sky was an exceptionally good book. One of the best works of Elif Şafak. Of course, I have to mention the discussions that we have in the Turkish Shelf online book club. I really enjoyed the reactions of my friends who read the book throughout the reading of the book, and their enthusiasm for contributing to the subjects that were touched upon in the book. Since I finished the book very recently, I cannot wait to have more discussions about the ending and many themes of the book in the following days. Overall, I gave There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Şafak a 9 out of 10. So those were the 6 books that I finished in the second half of February. Please comment down below, have you read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, and what did you think of them? If you're a new viewer, first of all, welcome. Please like and subscribe. Hope to see you very soon. Bye. As for Turkish word of the day, I'm going to choose down. Down means aşağı in Turkish, and aşağı is our Turkish word of the day. Have a good day.